I can't believe that this information is not blowing up around our world. The Admiral Michael Gilday, the Chief of Naval Operations of the U.S. Navy, is sitting there right now warning us that the entire Western strategic theater of war is at risk of eruption into a conflict that they say is unlike anything that the modern American or the modern European has ever experienced. Gilday, who is the Chief of Naval Operations of the U.S. Navy, is quoted as saying that we no longer just talk about the transatlantic nature of the NATO alliance. The transpolar aspect is going to drive behavior. I think that the region is increasingly going to get more attention as it becomes an area of more intense economic competition. Now, in terms of military speak, what they're saying right there is they know the Chinese government is going to work very hard to close down the South China Sea. It's where a massive amount of your goods that come to your Walmart, your Target, come from. As soon as they start restricting, taxing, or slowing down the goods that are coming there, this is going to drive an upset in the American population. People across the country and across the European and Western world are going to see shortages of things on their shelves. The first things that are going to be short on are the things that really matter, like medicine. We're already starting to see medicine shortages across the USA. And in fact, the FDA is working together with the CDC and the government at this day, this hour, to try and make it so that these shortages impact the US people as little as possible. So if you have a family member that is reliant upon a chemical pharmaceutical, 90% of the pharmacy medicine comes from China. It's from the raw ingredients, and it's just put together here, compounded here. Now, if you live in a rural area, you might have a local pharmacy compounding location, but if you're like most of the USA, wherever Walgreens or Walmart or Target Pharmacy or whoever you get it from gets it from is the compounding outlet. 90% of these raw goods come from China, and China knows that it holds the American people by the balls and by the throat. In doing so, they have literally controlled the entire playing field. So here we have an admiral of the U.S. Navy saying that intense competition is coming in the South China Sea. He continued to warn that global trade is being upset. A large part of this is what happens in the next phase. Here's the quote. Within the next couple of years, the trade routes between Asia and Europe will change fundamentally. Moreover, there is already a naval operation element that is increasing security linkage between these two theaters of war. European navies regularly operate with the USN in the Indo-Pacific. He says that you increasingly see combined patrols from the U.S. and the European navies out of this theater. Whether it happens in the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Gulf, further in the South China Sea, we're on a trajectory right now, he warns, that is trans-regional, all domain. It has driven us closer to a conflict with China than we ever have been at before. Crimea remains a red line for Putin, says the NATO defense minister. In a recent interview with different reporting outlets at the Estonian Defense Ministry, the defense minister of Estonia emphasized that losing control of this area is a line in the sand. It's a red line for Putin and Russia. Despite concerns that Moscow will use nuclear weapons, these individuals are urging NATO nations to not be deterred from supporting a potential Ukrainian ground retaking operation targeting the peninsula. They acknowledge right now that NATO and all Western allies possess channels through which they are trying to caution Russia against the use of nuclear weapons. Now, you start seeing in the American government and what they tell the people of the country that there's really no worry about nuclear weapons. There's nothing to worry about. Other countries are building bunkers. The rich and the powerful are building bunkers. If you look to Nate over at Canadian Prepper, he has a line of contact with the guys who are building the bunkers. Sometimes they'll name names that I, of course, can't repeat here. Sometimes you'll see it out in the open. The rich and the powerful are being prepared to go underground. There's no reason that they would be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars stockpiling decades of food, making their own ability to basically recreate a biome underground. while you, the American people, are being told there's nothing wrong. In Russia, they're retrofitting nuclear bunkers. In Europe, retrofitting nuclear bunkers. In Asia, they're getting people to run to deep underground shelters. But you're being lied to and told that nothing's wrong. But here we have out in the open acknowledgement that NATO allies are right now using existing channels of communication to caution Russia against the use of nuclear weapons. They are emphasizing that Russia's repeated atomic consideration is a job that can only be taken by NATO. They state, you don't have to be worried about what the Kremlin will do. Now, the strategic importance of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine cannot be misstated. The swift and relatively, changing seizure of the region by Russian troops, commonly referred to as the Green Men, due to their lack of identifiable insignia in 2014, was a show of force of Moscow. It reversed historical senses of national borders and what is controlled. Ukrainian troops are now getting ready to launch a counteroffensive that reclaims this peninsula. This is a drive away from different regions, including the nuclear power plant that is Europe's nuclear power plant that Russia has laced with explosives. And if this power plant in the region becomes compromised by Ukrainian or Western forces, Russia is fully prepared to blow it to bits. That will send a massive cloud of radioactive contamination across European borders, which will enact Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which sends all of NATO against the aggressor country. So you have this moment right now where we don't have a nuclear war. This moment right now to get ready. Now, of course, if you're like me, you can't buy or build a $100,000, $10,000 deep underground bunker. You don't have the funds maybe to do it, the ability to do it, the land to do it, whatever it might be. So what can you and I do? Well, if we look back to the Chernobyl accident, the children that had radiation damage during the Chernobyl accident, they were given real apple pectin. That apple pectin binds to cesium and some other heavy metals and some other contaminants, and it draws it in through the blood, through the intestines of the children, and they excrement it. They excrete it in their urine and in their feces. So how do you get real fruit pectin? Well, you go onto Amazon and you can get it right now. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. All I'm telling you is this is what the doctors